Greetings, comrades, and welcome back to another episode of the ComradeCast. And today we are going to take a detour out of the realm of real world politics. The last time, in fact, up until the election, we're very close to the election. So this is the last opportunity I have to get these brain worms that have been slithering around in my head out into public view. Because if I don't do it now, then what's going to happen is that, again, events I think are just going to start to unfold too quickly. Today, we're going to be doing something slightly different than normal. Yes, we're going to be talking about politics, but today I want to talk about politics vis-a-vis some popular media. So as you can see by the title, we are going to be talking about The Boys. And I watched season 4 months ago when it came out. And for whatever reason, I just can't get my frustration over it out of my head. So I want to talk about it publicly and maybe I can finally put it to bed. And at least we get to talk about something political in regards to The Boys, because it is a show which delves into political themes quite extensively. And unfortunately, it has been a show which I thought has been strong in terms of some of the political satire and takes that it has. The wheels really came off this season and it was frustrating to me. So I want to talk about why this piece of media fails as a political satire and talk about other political satires that have been successful and what makes an actually good piece of political satire in media, because it's a very difficult thing to do. Few people do it successfully, but when they do, it's amazing. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of this episode, obviously a massive spoiler alert, not just for The Boys season 4, but the entirety of this series, because we're going to be talking a little bit about the past, present, and obviously why I'm not super excited about the future. So there were, I think, a lot of failings of this season, not just in terms of how it handled political issues, in terms of writing and character development, and really across the board. I thought it was not very strong, but obviously we're going to be focusing on the political aspects today. And overall, I thought in some of the past seasons, the show did a pretty good job at really at least satirizing and showing the soulless nature of corporate media, corporate America, and how it effectively gloms onto anything that's popular and sucks the life out of it and leaves it to be discarded. And I always thought it did a pretty good job in focusing on what I thought was a pretty central message of the show, which is that the corporation, the evil corporation that it meant to embody all these different types of corporate entities within America, but predominantly Disney, I think, is the main one that it satirizes. Of course, the corporation Vought, which creates the superheroes and has its hands in just about every single jar in the world, they are the main enemy. That Vought is the main villain of the series. Well, yes, of course, our boy Homelander is a villain. He is the symptom of the toxic corporation in the first place. Because the thing is, even if Billy Butcher's successful and kills Homelander, Vought is just going to engineer another one and the cycle will go on. But in particular, I thought they had some pretty good points, some pretty good satirical points about how corporations latch on to things like what we on the left call rainbow capitalism or pink capitalism, which is corporations will present the front that they actually care about these issues, but in reality, they're only doing it because A, it's popular, and B, they think that it will get them more profit in the end. And what I thought they were going to do in this season was make the similar point into how now corporations are falling into a lot of, or at least some are, not necessarily all of them, are falling back into leaning into the traditional Americana as part of their branding. And what I thought they were originally going to take the show in was a direction that now that these kind of traditional Americana values or tokens or whatever you want to say are now being zeroed in by this corporate blood-sucking machine as the next thing to be sucked dry and then moved on from. But that's not really what happened. It became more of them trying to like riff off and satirize like real life people and real life influencers and stuff like that. And they just ended up doing in such a shoddy way, I guess you would say, that it really didn't land, at least for me personally. And I think in the time that we've had to watch this and digest it and read a lot of what other people are saying, I think a lot of people agree in the sense that it didn't land as strong or as compelling political satire, at least as much as some of the other points in the other seasons had. So let me get specific here, because there is one specific point that I want to drill in on that really emphasized what my problem is. And I literally cringed when I heard this when I was watching the episode. So here is the scene where I really started to cringe, but I'm not going to play any clips because, the second I play a clip, Jeff's going to be up my ass faster than you can say Timbuktu. So we're going to avoid that whole scenario. But there's a scene here where this vice president character, her name's Newman. I had to look up her first name. Completely forgot her first name. It's Victoria. So Victoria Newman, she's talking to this Republican senator guy. And right now that the president, like a left-leaning guy, wants to get rid of superheroes, and the Republicans are trying to court her to support them and not get rid of superheroes. She's a superhero. It's this really dumb thing. Super dumb plot. Okay. That's the point you guys have to fucking remember. Dumb plot. So anyway, they finagled her into this meeting of top Republican donors or whatever. And this guy's like the Speaker of the House. And he verbatim says this quote from, I remember this very clearly, I think it was 2011 or 2012, from a Republican, Todd Aiken, where he says that if a woman is sexually assaulted forcibly, you got to watch what you say on YouTube as much as possible. If a woman is endured forceful SA, her body, if it's a legitimate SA, her body has a way of shutting the whole thing down, right? Shutting the pregnancy down and just getting rid of it. And he says this line verbatim in the show. And I cringed, not because obviously this isn't a real thing that somebody said, and not because it isn't a horrible, terrible thing that somebody could believe, and not because there are certainly Republican lawmakers out there who still believe this in their heart of hearts. But the reason I cringed was because you're trying to take a real world quote and jam it into a fictional world that, yes, is a reflection or is proposing to be a reflection of our world. But when you jam in something from our world into that kind of illusionary fiction that you've created, that reflection of our world you've created, it destroys the illusion. And the way I felt about it was the way exact kind of feeling you get when one of the characters name drops the title of a movie or a TV show, like right in the middle of it. It just takes you out a bit. Like, why are they doing that? How would they know the title of the movie or TV show that they're in? And that's why it just strikes me as incredibly lazy satire. Because when you just copy paste real world things into a fictional world, again, they don't always compute. You need to have some kind of lens that you want to take your real world political message and put it through so you can inject it into the fictional world, right? You can't just put it in there as is. So there's a way you can absolutely do something like this, and a way you can make this political satire work, but it's not going to work if you just take real life quotes and again, put them into the fictional realm. So to take an example of what I would say is good political satire, let me talk about briefly one of my favorite movies of all time. Let me take you back to 2009 and talk a little bit about District 9. Again, a movie I think holds up not just in terms of its story, its themes, but its visual effects. The prawns and the weapons and everything like that in District 9 just look incredible. There are movies now coming out 15 years later that have 3 times the budget of that one and are producing visual effects that look half as good. Anyway, if you haven't seen District 9, spoiler alert, minor spoiler alert for District 9, it's about a race of aliens who have effectively been marooned. Their ship gets disabled and they get marooned over, I believe it's Cape Town, or it might be Johannesburg. It's a major city in South Africa, and these aliens, they become known as the prawns. They get marooned there, and they have to try and live on Earth while either fixing their ship or waiting for their, comrades off in space, wherever, to come and rescue them. But the prawns aren't allowed to live with the humans. They live in shanty towns on the outskirts, effectively. The movie takes place predominantly through the main character. God, I can't remember his name. Man, I should have looked it up. But the main character, he's basically like a corpo guy, and he has to go into District 9 and get the prawns approval to move them to a new, like, kind of shanty town, a new tent town, even further away from the human, because humans feel like they're too close. And of course, over time, as our main character starts to interact with the prawns, he starts to learn about them. He starts to become more like them and starts to effectively wonder, right, are prawns treating me better than my own humans treat me? And I won't spoil too much more of the movie. But the point is, it doesn't take too much thought to figure out what exactly District 9 is trying to tell in terms of a political satire, in terms of its political message. It is trying to draw parallels of historic actual events that happened during apartheid South Africa, and then framing them through the lens of prawns. And when you view it through this lens, you in the moment, right, you are absorbed by the world building and the characters and how well everything is put together. And then it's after the fact, when you stop looking through that lens and then, like, your real world vision returns, you start to realize, oh shit, that was pretty similar. Like, there was a lot of similar things that happened in that movie to our actual historical time period. So the point is, if the satire is done right, it will be filtered through the lens of the media in a way that you are either accepting of its existence. You might understand that it's there, but it's built into the world in such a way that everything works, or you don't even notice it, and you don't actually notice the satire. You don't even notice the message until later, that when you take off that fictional filter and you start thinking about the real world and you start to see the parallels that it was trying to make. The point here being is that you don't get that successful feeling by just eliciting. If they had made this movie and it had just been literally Black South Africans versus white South Africans, let's just say it wouldn't have garnered the same kind of reception or appreciation, or it wouldn't still be well known and well regarded today, I would feel like, if you just blatantly put what your message was in front of people. To do that, you want to do something like a documentary, which is supposed to be a digestible reflection of a real life event or real life experience from somebody, right? That's different from a piece of fiction. But now let's move to one of the main additions to season 4, and someone who I actually thought worked pretty decently as a political satire, because this is Firecracker, by the way. She's like a right-wing Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Loomer, sorry. I got my Lauras and my Loomers and my Laurens all mixed up. My apologies. But regardless, wow, I guess got myself all fucking discombobulated in my own head. She is supposed to be like a direct avatar, I think, or an amalgamation of all those people put together. And then she has her own podcast and radio show where she goes on about how the woke people are trying to take your kids away and trans them and so on and so forth. And I actually thought they did a pretty good job in terms of making her a good political satire, or put good political satire piece for what those women represent, because she wasn't necessarily directly quoting a lot of the crazy crap they said, but it was very close, very believable to the kind of stuff they say. Because if you have been following politics for a while and, their particular brand of politics, they say some pretty ridiculous and wild things. But where I thought the show actually failed, maybe I'm being a little bit naive here. Where I think they really failed with her is how, like, the right wing, quote unquote, treats her after a certain pivotal scene. So the scene in question here, and this is one of the scenes that I want to talk about and talk about publicly because it has been bothering me, and I'm interested to see what people think, and if I'm maybe in the minority here. There's a scene, and this is from episode 4, by the way, where Firecracker, the right-wing avatar or whatever, is having this like rally or podcast or show right in front of the person who's supposed to be the quote-unquote left-wing avatar. And oh man, they really screwed us on that one, because fucking Starlight does nothing the entire season. She's like completely useless. She shits all over her boyfriend for getting sexually assaulted. I don't know, maybe we'll get to that. That might be a whole rant in and of itself. They just totally, she wasn't my favorite character ever to begin with, but goddamn, they just totally butchered Starlight's character in this season. Just made her completely, totally useless. So anyway, Starlight, she has her house to help covering teens and stuff like that. It's like a shelter or whatever. And she's having her podcast rally, whatever you want to call it, right outside Starlight's house. And Billy Butcher and the boys confront her with this dirt that they have on her. Effectively, this dirt is that she was arrested when she was, I think in the show they say she's 29 or something like that. She was arrested when she was 29 because she was having sexual relations with a 15-year-old boy while she was the counselor in the Bible camp. Anyway, it goes by like really quickly or what the details are. It's assumed that she was arrested and got some sort of penalty. But anyway, they threaten her unless she stops her rally or whatever, that they're going to release this information to the public. And it looks like she's going to cave. And then she's like, oh, I'll send the tweet myself and let everybody know. So anyway, she sends it, and then she goes up there and she has this like big tearful thing about how she admits to doing it and how this boy helped her find Jesus or something. And everyone just like, yeah, okay, yeah, helped her find Jesus. Maybe some people can say that I'm giving the right too much credit here, and that could be the case. And this is part of the reason why I'm interested to see what people's perspectives are. But I feel like if this were real life and fucking Laura Loomer, when it came out that she was arrested for like a sexual relationship with a 15-year-old boy or one of these other types, I feel like that would be a huge deal. And not just that, I feel like a lot of her own fans would abandon her, because this is an attitude that I think is thankfully changing in society, that this idea that an elder woman can't abuse or can't commit statutory sexual assault against a minor because she's a conventionally attractive woman and right, he's a raging teenager. So he would totally be into do it and he would totally want to do it. That was the old attitude, but I think that is thankfully dying away because people understand. And let's just say you're one of the troglodytes that don't understand the issue with that mode of thinking and why that is a horrible and morally bankrupt way to view the world. Because at 29 years old, conventionally attractive woman, in if that's her type, like her, could have just about any man of her choosing, right? She would never be hurting for a choice of mate. In fact, she probably has dick thrown at her constantly. And in that scenario, when you have a large amount of choice and options, why would you turn to the pre-adult teenaged boy? The only reason you would do something like that is so you could exercise a position of power over them, that you can use your wisdom, your age, your experience, your position of authority as a camp counselor to manipulate them, to make them do whatever you want them to do. And when you get this attitude of people who brush that off, they haven't looked at what actually happens to the male victims in those circumstances. And when you look at the male victims, what ends up happening is one of two things, is that they're able to escape like their assaulter's orbit at some point in their life. And they realize like how unhealthy and disproportionate this relationship was. And usually when they escape, they still are pretty fucked up. They have trauma. They have emotional baggage. They have a lot of difficulty trusting people. Or what happens is that this assaulter now has effectively captivated this young man for life and has basically brought him into her influence for the rest of his life. And this is a lot of the times what ends up happening is like you have an older woman who, maybe groomed a guy who's 15 years old when they end up being in a relationship. And then 15 years later, when she's 45 and he's 30, he's still with her and he doesn't understand what it's like to have a normal relationship outside of this toxic power dynamic, because this is all that he's known in his life. And this is the only relationship that he's ever had. And the abuser has specifically structured it to be that way. So I don't know, maybe I am wrong in this assessment. And it is unfortunate because I have heard this kind of mentality from the left before, is certainly within the right. You'll hear this within the right a lot of the time. Sometimes both of them usually argue through traditional gender rules or traditional gender dynamics, which frustrates me personally. But the right will effectively argue that as the man, you should be the leader. You should be the one in charge. And if someone took advantage of you, it's your own fault because you weren't man enough. And then from the left-wing side, you'll have an argument based in patriarchal structures that still exist within society, that because you're a man, it's effectively impossible for a woman to abuse or take advantage of a man due to the said power and the natural power imbalance within society. Both of these perspectives are utterly garbage, and like to think, at least talking to people in my personal life, they are going away. Then again, the older the person I talk to, the more likely they are to have this kind of outdated attitude. So yeah, I feel like if this were real life and something like that happened to one of these ladies, they would be toast. They would lose their influence. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? She had her affair on her husband, and Bobart had another affair too. Both of them are not exactly faithful. Shocking, surprising they don't live up to their principles. Who would imagine such a thing? But even due to these transgressions, they have lost a lot of popularity that they used to have. They're nowhere near as popular as they were back in the day. And I feel like if they had something explicitly criminal and predatory like this, they would be absolutely done. And if they weren't, basically anyone could just go to any of their speaking engagements and say, if you cared about kids so much, maybe you should stop diddling them. So yeah, I thought that was pretty silly and pretty unrealistic. And again, not exactly making a good satirical point. The point they're trying to make would be that the base itself, the fan base, the right-wing fan base itself is hypocritical. And if they were to give her a pass in real life, or one of these characters in the past in real life, it absolutely would be hypocritical. But I think that they are losing the plot, because at one point, Firecracker expressly says that she harnesses the malcontent of a lot of these people and fashions it towards her own goals, right? And harnesses it explicitly to destroy Starlight as her main goal, because she has a rivalry with her, but she harnesses this discontent to her own ends, to her own goals. But when it comes to actually portraying these people, they don't portray them as like downtrodden people who have been captivated by this toxic ideology. They portray them as just toxic people in general, which I certainly think you would be if you're willing to support someone who just so casually tosses aside the fact that she committed a sexual assault against a minor. You bring in this really serious point, this really serious allegation, and you just like totally throw it away in the show. And yeah, again, very stupid, not realistic. And another reason why I think this season really failed as a piece of political satire. So the last way I would say that The Boys season 4 fails as a political satire is, so at first it failed by injecting real world issues into the fictional world. And then the second way I feel like it failed was by taking something serious and not reacting as serious as you would imagine people would, particularly when you have high political stakes regarding a lot of the characters' goals and what they're trying to accomplish. But the last way I think it really failed was in its ending, in the sense that it really got away, I think, from what the core idea and core message of the show is. And the ending fails because I feel like it just doesn't take into account real people, the actual population of people out there, and what they want and what they think and how they would interact and how they would feel about what's happening. I'll be real, I think the ending was hot garbage for this season. It didn't make any sense at all. So you have Sister Sage or whatever, the smartest person in the world, come up with this plan that doesn't make any fucking sense at all. Her plan, and it ends, spoiler, it ends with Homelander not becoming the president, but effectively becoming the president. He has like a proxy in the Speaker of the House that he can work through. So anyway, the whole season was about him trying to finagle his way into political power. What happens at the end doesn't make any sense at all. So the president, who I mentioned, I guess he's left-wing. It's not really 100% clear, but it seems like he's left-wing. And he has his vice president, who is a superhero as well, but nobody knows she is a superhero, right? So the president has a very anti-superhero agenda, and he clearly won the election. So obviously the people have given a anti-superhero mandate, anti-superhero agenda to their legislative bodies. This has clearly happened. So at the end, they remove the president who is elected under I believe it was the 25th Amendment, that he doesn't have the mental capacity to fulfill the oath of office. And the way they do this is because they capture him on a hidden camera saying that he wants to assassinate his vice president. And this doesn't make any sense to me on so many goddamn levels. One, what if he just shuts the fuck up? What if he just doesn't say anything? Then your whole plan is ruined. Two, how did you get the camera in there anyway and have it conveniently pointed at him with perfect audio at the exact moment he said the incriminating thing? Three, wouldn't the people be outraged that their vice president was a superhero and they didn't know about it? And wouldn't they think the president was probably justified in wanting to eliminate this threat to them? Now, wouldn't they not think, oh man, he tried to eliminate this secret superhero, was a huge danger to not just him, but potentially the entire American population. We better get that guy out of office. So they get him out of office. They just get rid of him based on this 25th Amendment and this incriminating evidence that he wanted to assassinate his vice president. Again, there's clearly no backup plan if he just keeps his mouth shut. You can't just assume people are going to talk and explicitly just assume that they're going to just reveal incriminating information and reveal incriminating evidence. People aren't that predictable. And that's one of the things that I guess drives me nuts about a lot of these kind of really smart person archetypes and how everything cascades, because people are inherently unpredictable. There's no way you can predict whether or not someone is going to say incriminating evidence. There's no way you can predict that. And if you're a smart person trying to calculate and fashion a reasonable plan for the future that has success, you're going to want to eliminate as much unpredictability as possible. And you want to eliminate as much reliance on people as you can, because again, people are inherently unpredictable unless you have some way to assuage or assure that they're going to do exactly what you want them to do. And there's a big issue with a lot of these like super smart characters that it just seems like when they're in the field and when they're doing their thing, people are just robots. They just do exactly what the smart person wants every single time, mysteriously somehow. There's no area of randomness. There's no area where this person might not do exactly what they thought they were going to do the entire time. So yeah, that was dumb. That whole thing was dumb. And the reason that they got rid of the president was dumb. And now that the president is gone and the vice president is exploded, they put, of course, the Speaker of the House. He was the guy, the woman has the ability to shut that whole thing down guy. That was him. And now he's the president because the Speaker of the House is third in line if president and vice president are killed. And then he like gets up there on the podium for 12 seconds. And then Homelander's just, okay, dude, now I'm going to talk. We're going to make sure everybody pays for killing the vice president who was secretly a superhero. And they just expect the population to accept that. Like, they just clearly voted for an anti-superhero agenda. And it's not like they're going to change their mind because their vice president was secretly a superhero. If anything, that would, I think, embolden the population's anti-superhero stance. So they're not just going to accept the fucking Speaker of the House, part of a party who presumably wasn't elected for the executive office, just handing over the entire reins of power to Homelander, and everyone's just going to be like, yep, okay. Like, I get it. There's obviously, they're setting up for some like big crackdown against the hashtag resistance. But this idea that the entire American population, or enough of them, is just going to roll over and accept this and accept Homelander as the de facto president, I think it's extremely far-fetched. I honestly would have found it way more believable if Homelander runs as a political candidate and gets elected through a mandate, because I find it more believable that enough people would vote for a literal superhero to be in charge of the country, especially because, right, the people of the country don't know what a colossal piece of shit Homelander is. All they see is the glossy veneer of the American superhero. So I feel like if he had just run as a political candidate, that would have been a more honestly believable story. I think people would have been more willing and likely to accept him if he just went out there and he said, yeah, you know what? If you're tired of all these loser humans telling you what to do, why don't you put me in charge and I'll really shake things up and things are really going to explode here, right? I got a super brain and I'm going to be able to command the ship way better than anybody else could. That to me would have not only been probably more interesting, but more believable than these weird kind of like political machinations happening behind the scene. Anyway, it was dumb. The whole season, in my mind, very much so a failure. Very few moments which stand out to me as strong moments, and I'm not hugely excited for the final season. What do I know? I'm not a superior being. I'm just a capybarnia. And with that, we'll end this discussion. Sorry to bring you guys down this rabbit hole with me. This had been just on my mind, and I couldn't get rid of it until I talked about it openly. And now, finally, hopefully, I can feel a moment of catharsis and we can actually move on to what's going to be happening all of October, which is going to be the election. Is there going to be a surprise? Who knows? There might be a surprise. Anyway, with that, we're going to wrap it up for now. And I want to thank you guys for watching. This has been the Comrade signing off for now, and I'll see you guys next time.